So, picture this. You were looking out at a pasture, right?
Yeah.
And there was a 28-year-old quarter horse out there. Now, at 28, I mean, a horse has lived a full life. They've seen a lot of miles and probably carried a lot of weight.
Oh, absolutely. That is definitely a senior citizen in the equine world.
Right. And for a while, this specific gelding was, well, barely able to walk. Just watching him try to get up from lying down in the grass was this heartbreaking struggle.
Yeah, that's tough to see.
You'd look at him and assume, this is simply the inevitable painful end of the road.
Yeah.
But then, and this is the crazy part, a few months later, you look at it, that exact same pasture, and that exact same senior horse is just joyfully trotting around.
Like he's a decade younger.
Exactly. Like he shaved a decade off his age. It sounds almost unbelievable, like some kind of Hollywood movie script.
Yeah.
But that is a real documented case we are digging into today.
It is, it's an incredibly powerful image, and it really perfectly captures the stakes of what we are discussing. When we talk about joint health in these magnificent, 1,200-pound animals, we aren't just talking about fixing a slight limp.
No.
Or like a minor inconvenience. We are talking about their fundamental quality of life. We are talking about whether they spend their golden years in chronic pain or, moving with comfort and dignity.
And that brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We were taking a really comprehensive guide that was published on March 22nd, 2026 by Laurent Fabian over at Ingredientsage.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. And we are going to use it to completely demystify the world of joint supplements for senior horses. Because, if you own a horse, or even if you are just fascinated by biomechanics, the feed store shelves are just packed with these flashy tubs.
Oh yeah, making some pretty wild promises.
Right. So we are going to cut through all that marketing hype. We're going to look at the actual biological science of what works, how it works on a molecular level, and give you a highly practical roadmap for keeping an aging horse moving comfortably.
Setting the stage here, I think the most crucial thing to understand is that joint health isn't achieved by just throwing expensive powders at a horse and hoping for the best.
Yeah, there's no magic dust.
Exactly. It requires a really deep understanding of the physical mechanics of aging. You have to make informed, strategic, and, highly specific choices based on the actual cellular deterioration happening inside the animal.
So let's start right there. Under the hood.
Hey.
To fix the problem, we really need to understand what is actually breaking down as the horse ages.
Right. The biological reality.
Yeah, and it's essentially a triple threat. First, the cartilage in the joints starts wearing down. Second, the synovial fluid decreases. And third, as a direct result of that increased friction, inflammation sets in.
And it creates a vicious cycle.
It does. And if you're listening to this thinking, well, I don't need to worry until my horse is in its late 20s, the timeline might actually surprise you. The telltale signs of this deterioration typically start showing up between 15 and 20 years old.
Which, in the equine world, is often considered late middle age for a well-cared-for horse. And you really have to watch for the subtle signs.
Right, it's not always obvious.
No, it's rarely a dramatic, sudden limp. It might just be that your horse takes a little longer to warm up during a ride, or maybe you are out on a trail and they suddenly seem hesitant to walk down a steep hill.
And people might think that's just the horse being stubborn.
Exactly. But that hesitation isn't stubbornness. It is their way of communicating that the internal cushioning in their joints is starting to fail under the pressure.
And when you think about the physics of a 1,200-pound animal, it makes absolute sense that this failure doesn't happen evenly across the whole body. The high-motion joints, the ones taking the absolute brunt of the physical impact, are the most vulnerable.
Especially the hock and the fetlock.
Right. And for anyone not deeply immersed in horse anatomy, the fetlock is essentially the horse's ankle. It's that joint right above the hoof that takes an immense repetitive load every single time the horse takes a step.
Yeah, the concussive force there is massive.
And then the hock is kind of the equivalent of a human heel and ankle located halfway up the back leg, and it acts as this massive, complex shock absorber.
A horse's career history is also a massive predictor of where that damage is going to hit hardest. Think about a former racehorse who spent years pounding on a hard track.
Right, or a jumper.
Exactly, a jumper landing with immense force on their front legs. Or a cutting horse who spent a decade making incredibly sharp athletic turns on their hindquarters. They're all going to experience that deterioration much earlier and in very different anatomical locations than a horse used mostly for light weekend trail riding.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. The very common way people talk about this is comparing an aging horse to an old car that just needs some fresh oil and maintenance. And I have a real problem with that analogy.
Oh, how so?
Well, a car is an inanimate object, right? You pull the plug, drain the old oil, pour in a fresh quart, and you're good to go. But a horse is a living, complex biological system. If that synovial fluid in the joint is acting like the hydraulic fluid in a mechanical shock absorber and it starts drying up, you eventually get bone grinding on bone.
Right, which is agonizing.
So my question is, are we just temporarily lubricating these joints to hide the pain, or can these supplements actually rebuild the biological engine?
What's fascinating here is the vital distinction between prevention, management, and reversal. To address your pushback directly, we cannot rebuild a completely blown biological engine.
So there are limits.
Strict limits. If a horse has severe bone-on-bone joint damage where the cartilage has entirely eroded away, no oral supplement in the world is going to reverse that and grow brand new cartilage from scratch. In those severe end-stage cases, supplements can only slow the further progression of the deterioration and help manage the inflammatory pain.
So it's a hard structural limitation.
Yeah.
Once the biological scaffolding of that cartilage is completely gone, it's just gone for good.
Precisely. And that is why starting these supplements before the horse looks visibly stiff is the true key to longevity. You are trying to introduce these cellular building blocks while the body still has enough of a healthy foundation to utilize them effectively.
Ah, I see.
The goal is to preserve the cartilage and the synovial fluid they still have, rather than waiting for a catastrophic failure and trying to perform a miracle resurrection on a joint that has already collapsed.
Okay, so if we're trying to preserve that biological shock absorber, how do we chemically replace the specific elements? We know the cartilage is wearing down and the fluid is drying up. This brings us to what are often called the foundational fixes.
Right, glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate.
Yeah, these two are everywhere in the supplement aisle, but let's talk about the how. How do they actually work inside the joint?
Well, they are the absolute heavy hitters of the joint supplement world because they each serve a highly specific complementary function. Think of glucosamine as the foundational building block, the raw material.
Okay.
Its primary role is to help build and maintain the actual structural matrix of the cartilage itself. And then chondroitin sulfate works right alongside it, but its job is to keep that cartilage healthy, plump, and hydrated.
I was actually reading about the mechanism of chondroitin in the guide, and it is brilliant. It essentially acts like a microscopic sponge.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
The chondroitin molecules possess a negative electrical charge, and that charge magnetically attracts water molecules into the cartilage tissue. It literally pulls fluid in, plumping up the cartilage so it retains that spongy, shock-absorbing quality.
That is exactly the mechanism, and it's why they are always paired together. But the raw numbers required to make this happen in a horse are staggering. Veterinarians recommend a therapeutic dose of 10,000 to 15,000 milligrams of glucosamine daily.
Wow. When you look at human joint supplements, they usually top out around, what, 1,500 milligrams?
Yeah, right around there.
So 10 times that amount feels like an enormous dose. But again, we have to completely reset our mental scale for equine pharmacology. We're talking about supporting a massive frame on 4 relatively fragile, high-impact pillars.
Exactly.
But the source material notes something really interesting about bioavailability, specifically regarding glucosamine sulfate versus glucosamine HCl. If I'm understanding the chemistry here, the sulfate version is generally considered more effective because the cartilage actively needs sulfur bonds to build its structure.
You've got it.
And the HCl version hydrochloride just doesn't provide those necessary sulfur building blocks, right?
Your deduction is spot on. The molecular sulfur bonds provided by the sulfate form are critical for integration into the cartilage matrix. But cheaper supplements often use the glucosamine HCl form to cut manufacturing costs.
Oh, of course they do.
Right. So a consumer might look at a label, see 10,000 milligrams of glucosamine, and think they're doing the right thing. But because it's a less bioavailable form, the horse's digestive tract simply cannot absorb it effectively. A large percentage of it just passes right through their system. Quality and molecular form absolutely matter more than just the sheer quantity printed on the tub.
Which means you want the premium, bioavailable form that actually makes it into the bloodstream. And working in tandem with those two is another superstar ingredient, right? Hyaluronic acid, or HA.
Yes, HA is crucial.
If glucosamine and chondroitin are rebuilding the sponge, HA is the ultimate lubricant for the synovial fluid we mentioned earlier. And what really stands out about HA is the timeline. The data shows HA acts fast, often showing visible results in just 4 to 6 weeks.
It acts incredibly quickly compared to glucosamine and chondroitin. Those can take several months to truly integrate into the tissue structure and show a difference. But HA provides a much more immediate, soothing lubrication.
So it's like a quick relief while the heavy lifting happens in the background.
Exactly. It essentially tops off the viscosity of the joint fluid, actively reducing the mechanical friction that is causing the daily wear and tear.
And that friction brings us to the next massive piece of this puzzle. Rebuilding the cartilage and replacing the fluid takes care of the long-term mechanical friction. But friction causes inflammation, and inflammation equals immediate pain.
Yes, that's the immediate crisis.
If you have a stiff gelding standing in your paddock today, you need to fight that fire right now. How do these supplements tackle the acute inflammation?
This is where we transition into the anti-inflammatories, which can be broken down into the trusted classics and the newer, trendier options. The absolute baseline, the gold standard classic, is MSM methylsulfonylmethane.
That is a mouthful.
It is. But despite the intimidating scientific name, it is essentially a highly bioavailable natural source of sulfur. It drastically reduces cellular inflammation and supports healthy connective tissue. And the required daily dose for a horse sits between 5,000 and 10,000 milligrams.
Okay, so a huge dose of that too.
Yeah.
And working alongside MSM, you have omega-3 fatty acids. Now, we usually associate omega-3s with giving a horse a nice shiny coat, but they are incredibly powerful systemic anti-inflammatories. You need about 2 to 3 grams daily.
Right. And the source of those omega-3s matters.
Yeah, because fish oil is a fantastic, dense source of omega-3s. But there is a very practical hurdle here. Horses are herbivores, and they absolutely despise the stinky smell of fish oil.
Oh, they hate it.
If you pour fish oil on their grain, they will usually just flip the bucket over and walk away. So ground flaxseed is an excellent, highly palatable alternative that provides those same anti-inflammatory benefits without the fishy odor.
It's a crucial workaround because you can scientifically formulate the most perfect bioavailable supplement in the world, but if the horse refuses to eat it, its efficacy is literally zero. Palatability is half the battle in equine nutrition.
Speaking of things you feed a horse, here's where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about the trendy newcomers to the joint supplement game. We are looking at turmeric, specifically its active compound, curcumin, and New Zealand green-lipped mussel.
Yes, those are very popular right now.
I have to admit, the image of feeding a massive farm animal imported New Zealand green-lipped mussels or a turmeric paste that requires a mix of black pepper and fat just to be absorbed. It sounds less like a practical barn routine and more like a trendy hipster smoothie bar in Brooklyn.
It does sound a bit extravagant.
Right. Why are owners doing this? Are these holistic options actually standing up to the tried and true science of MSM?
This raises an important question about how we evaluate emerging supplement trends in veterinary medicine. The hipster smoothie analogy is quite visual, but there is genuine peer-reviewed science at play here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The New Zealand green-lipped mussel, for instance, provides a very unique synergistic combination of omega-3s, amino acids, and minerals that you don't find in standard marine or plant sources.
So it brings something new to the table.
Exactly. While MSM remains the trusted baseline for most horses, biology is complex. Sometimes a horse's body simply plateaus on one specific compound and stops responding. These newcomers offer an alternative biological pathway. They provide a different mechanism of action to reduce inflammation when the standard route loses its effectiveness.
So it's not just a fad. It's a strategic alternative when you hit a biological wall. But there is a massive flashing warning sign regarding the turmeric, especially for anyone listening who takes their horse to competitions.
Yes, this is a very critical point.
Turmeric contains compounds that can trigger a positive result in a competition drug test. You could be feeding it with the best intentions, purely for holistic natural joint support, and suddenly you are facing a medication violation at a major show. You have to check your specific equestrian association's rulebook before you ever add turmeric to a feed pan.
It is a significant trap that catches many well-meaning owners off guard. You always have to verify the regulatory status of any anti-inflammatory, even the natural plant-based ones.
Okay, let's bring this all together into a practical consumer survival guide. Because you're walking down the aisle of your local feed store, you know you need sulfur, you know about the chondroitin sponge, you are weighing flaxseed against New Zealand mussels. The tubs on the shelf range from $20 to over $150.
It can be incredibly overwhelming.
Definitely. And I want to push back on that higher number for a second. $150 a month for one horse is a massive financial commitment over the course of a year. Are owners genuinely getting their money's worth there? Or is the supplement industry just capitalizing on the guilt people feel when they see their beloved older horse slowing down?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the context of that $150 shifts dramatically. Yes, it is a significant monthly line item. However, you have to contrast that preventative cost against the astronomical veterinary bills associated with treating severe, neglected joint deterioration.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Once a joint fails, you're looking at specialized intra-articular joint injections, constant farm calls from your vet, and expensive prescription pain management. Those acute medical bills will dwarf a $150 monthly supplement cost incredibly quickly. You are paying for preventative structural maintenance to avoid catastrophic expensive failure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But if I am making that kind of investment, I need to know how to read the label. And the biggest red flag I see on these tubs is the phrase proprietary blend.
Oh, absolutely. Avoid that.
If I'm paying top dollar, I don't want a mystery scoop. Proprietary blend just sounds like a legal loophole for a company to hide the fact that they're using incredibly low dosages of the expensive active ingredients.
It often is.
If I know my horse needs 10,000 milligrams of glucosamine sulfate, I need to see that exact number on the label, not a generic joint support matrix where I have no idea if I'm getting a therapeutic dose or just cheap filler.
Your intuition is exactly right. A reputable company has no reason to hide their active ingredient dosages behind a proprietary blend. You want clear, specific active ingredient lists with exact milligram counts per serving.
What about third-party testing?
That is another major green flag. Companies that voluntarily pay outside laboratories to verify their label claims for purity and potency are generally the most trustworthy.
You also need to check the expiration dates, which sounds basic, but it is critical here. The guide points out that these compounds lose their potency when exposed to heat and humidity. And let's face it, the environment of almost every tack room or feed shed in the world during the middle of July is essentially a hot, humid sauna.
The environmental degradation of these products is a huge issue. If the active ingredients break down before they ever reach the feed bucket, you are just feeding expensive dust.
Yeah, that's just throwing money away.
Exactly. And from a purely practical standpoint, for those picky eaters we mentioned earlier, look for pelleted supplements rather than powders.
Oh, because the powders just settle at the bottom.
Right. Powders tend to sift to the very bottom of the feed bucket, get mixed with dirt, and get left behind. A pelleted formula ensures the horse actually consumes the entire dose.
But even if you have the perfect pelleted supplement, properly stored and happily eaten by the horse, there is a massive caveat that we have to address. You must involve your veterinarian in these decisions.
I cannot stress this enough.
If you have your older horse on a prescription anti-inflammatory from the vet like Bute or Equox, and you independently decide to start dumping high doses of MSM and turmeric on top of it, you aren't helping. You are risking severe gastrointestinal ulcers or completely overwhelming the horse's metabolic system. The vet is the only one who knows the complete medical history and can guide you on safe chemical combinations.
It is a really dangerous misconception that because a supplement is natural or over-the-counter, it cannot be harmful. They are biologically active compounds, and they must be treated with the same respect as a pharmaceutical.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most sobering point of this whole deep dive. The holistic reality check. Because these supplements, even the $150 buckets of perfectly formulated third-party tested pellets, are not magic dust.
They absolutely are not. And the most common pitfall for owners is expecting a miracle cure overnight. First, there is the biological timeline. As we discussed, it takes 6 to 12 weeks for most of these structural supplements to integrate and show real improvement.
So it's a waiting game.
It is. You cannot feed a joint supplement for 2 weeks, see no change in the horse's gait, and declare that the product is a scam. Patience is physiologically mandatory.
So what does this all mean for the daily routine? You can't just feed a horse a highly engineered pill and then leave them standing in a muddy, uneven paddock with completely overgrown hooves and expect them to trot around effortlessly. These supplements only work as one single cog in a much larger management machine.
Precisely. You have to look at the entire biomechanical system of the animal. Proper weight management is vital.
Because of the stress on the joints?
Yes, every extra 100 pounds of fat is exponential. punishing stress on those aging joints. And you need appropriate, gentle, consistent exercise to keep the joints mobile and the synovial fluid circulating without overworking them. Plus, they need good level footing in their pasture or stall so they aren't constantly twisting their lower legs in deep mud.
And regular meticulous hoof care is non-negotiable. If you neglect the hooves, the joint supplements are pretty much useless. We talked earlier about the fetlock and the hock taking the brunt of the impact. The way a farrier trims a hoof dictates something called the breakover.
This is a really important concept.
For anyone listening, the breakover is the exact moment the horse's heel lifts off the ground and the toe tips forward, acting like a hinge. If the toe is too long and that hinge is sticky or delayed, the kinetic force doesn't dissipate smoothly. It shoots right at the leg, directly punishing the fetlock and the hock with every single step.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. If the biomechanics of the foot are wrong, the joints above it will always suffer, no matter what you feed the horse. This is why keeping detailed records of their hoof care, their exercise routine, and their supplement intake is so important.
So you can track what's working.
Right. You share that data with your vet and your farrier so you can adjust the management plan together over time. It truly frames joint care as an overall philosophy. It is about maintaining a senior horse's dignity and their quality of life in their golden years. It is a holistic, unwavering commitment to the animal's entire well-being.
That is a really profound perspective. So to summarize our journey today, we started by looking under the hood at the brutal mechanical wear and tear of aging joints. We explored the molecular fixes, understanding why we need sulfate bonds to build cartilage, and how chondroitin acts as a microscopic sponge to pull in fluid.
It's incredible biochemistry.
It really is. We looked at how to fight the fire of inflammation with everything from sulfur to ground flaxseed and even alternative pathways like New Zealand mussels. We navigated the wild world of feed store labels, learning why proprietary blends are a red flag. And finally, we grounded all of this biochemistry in the absolute necessity of holistic, whole horse lifestyle care.
It is a massive amount of technical information, but for anyone looking out at an aging horse in their pasture, it is an incredibly empowering roadmap.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have just spent this entire deep dive discussing the extraordinary effort we put into our animals. We research highly specific, bioavailable nutrients. We practice proactive early intervention. We make meticulous, holistic lifestyle adjustments to manage their longevity. And we do it years before their bodies completely break down.
Yeah, we go all out for them.
We do. So what might we learn if we applied that exact same preventative, holistic, and incredibly patient approach to our own aging process?
Wow. Now that is something to seriously think about the next time you are painstakingly measuring out exact milligrams of glucosamine sulfate for your horse while completely ignoring the chronic pain in your own aching knees. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and we will see you on the next deep dive.